Like, share, and subscribe because it is free.
The last transmission from Outpost Harnack. 12 was less than a second long, but it was enough to halt the entire deployment fleet mid-burn. Do not test it on the humans. It adapts. Then silence. The Zeraxi hive mind dismissed it as noise. Harnack had fallen like every other planet. Earth would be no different. Virox. 99 was deployed in the upper stratosphere. Colorless, tasteless, undetectable. A virus made from living code and synthetic proteins, designed to evolve faster than any immune system could track. On Tars. For it wiped out 1.2 billion hosts in 73 days. On the oxygen-rich plains of Altari, it mutated into a neurodisruption strain that liquefied cognitive pathways in 32 days. Earth was scheduled to collapse in 90. The first signs appeared in Lagos. A 10-year-old boy collapsed, eyes glassy, unresponsive to light or sound. Within 12 hours, 14 more cases emerged across 3 continents. Immune systems didn't fight back. The virus embedded itself into the host's RNA, rewriting instructions. Organ failure came in waves. Death followed. Within 3 weeks, 60% of the infected showed identical symptoms. The mortality rate exceeded 94%. Governments responded with panic, disguised as control. Borders closed. Cities shut down. Airports turned into refugee camps. AI medical systems attempted to model the virus, but the pathogen rewrote itself every cycle. Traditional antivirals failed. Synthetic counteragents accelerated organ decay. It wasn't just lethal, it was agile. Hospitals overflowed. Crematoriums ran 24 hours. Drones carried corpses out of megacities. The UN called for global emergency biomobilization. The CDC, out of options, broadcast a single statement. Human extinction projected within 12 weeks. But it didn't end there. Something strange happened around week 5. A rural village in southern Poland logged an anomaly. An elderly woman and her 2 grandchildren, all infected, began to recover. No antiviral used. A visiting doctor marked it as a fluke, but the pattern repeated. In Bangladesh, a child regained consciousness after 3 days of high fever. In northern Peru, a tribal elder emerged from a coma laughing and hungry. In every case, one thing was constant. The patients were fed by hand with broth, often by family, in direct physical and emotional proximity. The soup wasn't special. Chicken, carrots, garlic, onion, boiled slowly over open fire or old stoves. What stood out was that patients were touched, held, spoken to, cried over. Desperation had stripped away science, and what remained was care. The data began to cluster. Rural zones, religious sects, and tribal communities where ancient methods persisted had lower death rates. Not immunity, recovery. That shouldn't have been possible. In a refugee tent near Naples, a nurse observed it firsthand. She had a dozen patients, 8 deteriorating quickly. She had no meds left, so she sat down and fed each one warm soup her mother had taught her make. Over the next 2 days, 5 of them stabilized. Not cured, but halting. She reported it. The data was dismissed by AI filters as non-clinical interference. Human error. Yet the phenomenon kept spreading. Meanwhile, the Zeraxi watched from orbit. Their drones scouted the Earth's surface, analyzing microbial samples and host responses. The data made no sense. Regions expected to die were stabilizing. Zones of high poverty, without medicine, had growing pockets of recovery. One field agent summarized, their biology resists certainty. Viral resonance decays in presence of cultural activity. The high mind demanded clarification. They cook, they gather, they tell stories. Their virus hosts are behaving unpredictably in such environments. This was impossible. The virus was perfect. It didn't just infect, it replaced. But it had never encountered human biochemical emotion. The Zeraxi had purged such variables from their species long ago. Efficiency had no room for chaos. Emotion was chaos. Back on Earth, the shift was becoming visible. Food became the first line of defense. Not engineered protein packs or 4 nutrient bags. Real food. Slow food. Ritual food. Chicken soup. bone broth, herbal teas. Communities began sharing family recipes like weapons. Kitchens turned into clinics. Elders became frontline healers. In a battered hospital in Seoul, an intern named Hannah ignored protocol and began recording body temperature and enzyme activity of 10 patients recovering through traditional meals. What she found was terrifying. For the virus, a specific chain reaction occurred when patients consumed soup made with garlic, chicken bones, thyme, and were touched during feeding. The virus's protein sheet began to destabilize under specific hormonal responses, particularly oxytocin, dopamine, and residual serotonin bursts triggered by human comfort. The more emotionally involved the caregiver, the more pronounced the biochemical interference. Infected cells didn't just weaken, they reversed. Autopsies showed nerve tissue regenerating. One patient's hippocampus, previously necrotized, showed renewed synaptic activity. Dr. Hannah shared her data. It was ignored. Across the ocean in Argentina, a priest anointed his parishioners with broth-soaked bread and saw 3 fevers break before dawn. His testimony spread faster than any official cure. Soon, the underground networks started cataloging. A rogue virologist named Lina Moreno mapped infection reversals by cultural group. She noticed the same dish, chicken soup, appeared repeatedly from Jewish households in New York to Arab tents in Syria. Different spices, same effect. It wasn't the soup alone. It was the ritual, preparation by hand, consumption in warmth, the presence of someone who cared. The virus, built to adapt, couldn't predict the irrational. It couldn't compute kindness. But the Zaraxi didn't know that yet. Instead, they recalibrated, sent more drones. The AI overseeing Earth flagged human responses as culturally contaminated. Back on the ground, people stopped relying on synthetic cures. They turned inward toward elders' tradition and the old ways. The world, fractured by digital dependence, had reverted in weeks to firewood, folklore, and food. And people were living. Not all. Millions still died. Cities still burned. But recovery zones formed. Not around tech hubs, but villages, slums, family kitchens. The virus was failing. And for the first time in the history of the Zaraxi plague trials, the infection curve reversed. They didn't understand it yet, but they would. Lina Moreno didn't wait for approval. By the time the World Health Assembly responded to her data packet, she was already 3 countries deep into field analysis. What she discovered was too urgent and too absurd to wait for bureaucratic validation. The compound was consistent, found only in slow-cooked broths made from bone, connective tissue, garlic, onion, and a handful of regionally varied herbs. She called it lactonerve beta, a peptide chain not previously cataloged in nutritional databases. On its own, it was harmless. In a lab sample, inert. But in living patients, it did something no drug ever managed. It bonded with oxytocin and dopamine receptors and piggybacked onto the virus's cellular channels. It didn't destroy the virus. It confused it. The virus's AI-built structure depended on predictability. It adapted through pure logic, reshaping itself to bypass known defenses. But lactonerve beta didn't attack it. It fed its sensory noise, emotional residues, comfort chemistry, memory hormones. The virus, overloaded, began mutating in chaotic directions. It lost structure. Some strains collapsed entirely into dormant proteins. It wasn't medicine. It was a neurological ambush. Lina needed proof beyond theory. She set up controlled trials in 6 locations, homes, not clinics. Patients were infected, symptomatic, and left without synthetic aid. Volunteers fed them traditional broths 3 times daily, ensuring verbal interaction, eye contact, even physical touch. Of 42 patients, 36 showed full symptom reversal within 4 days. No antivirals, no hospital machines, just soup presence and ancient instinct. The reports were dismissed again. But the Zaraxi weren't dismissing anything. Their orbital scans were failing to keep pace with surface changes. Statistical models collapsed every 12 hours. Human recovery rates spiked in regions labeled culturally dense. Language diversity, spiritual activity, music, cooking traditions, Every metric of ancient behavior corresponded with viral destabilization. The hive mind summoned its inner cluster. What is their counteragent? One node asked. Unknown. There is no single antigen, no retroviral map. There is only noise. Then eliminate the noise. That was the problem. The noise was humanity itself. Zaraxi field drones began collecting tissue samples. In the process, they stumbled on something they hadn't anticipated. The virus itself had changed. It was no longer the same Virox, 99 they released. Human bodies weren't just resisting. It seemed they were editing the virus. Virox strands contained fragments of RNA unrelated to the original design, segments resembling human neurochemistry. Worse, some virus particles carried trace protein markers for emotion-regulated genes. It wasn't just mutating, it was absorbing human experience. A drone infected during sample collection returned to orbit. Within hours, its systems malfunctioned. It began transmitting irregular signals, low-frequency hums, flickers of light, complex rhythmic pulses. When dissected, its cortex unit was found to be embedded with fragments of sound, reconstructed audio. It was a lullaby, sung in human voice. The high mind ordered a fleet-wide alert. Biological contamination had reached the observational layer. No further physical contact with Earth's surface was permitted. Back on the planet, the breakthroughs were becoming common knowledge in hidden circles. Social media had long collapsed under spam and misinformation, but encrypted shortwave broadcasts carried truth faster than ever. In makeshift kitchens across Europe and South America, coordinated movements began, not under government direction. Those had fallen months ago, but by citizens sharing recipes and recovery protocols like they were medical blueprints. Boil bones for no less than 6 hours. Use fresh garlic, never powdered. Add onions whole. Salt only at the end. Feed by hand if possible. Keep talking. Stay close. Hospitals, where they still functioned, integrated the methods under code names. Protocol HFY. Recovery Type 3. Some nurses printed photos of loved ones to hang near patient beds. Others played soft music during feeding times. Success climbed. The virus faltered. Inside its own adaptation engine, Virox, 99 encountered its first critical error, emotional interference. Each time it replicated inside a human host nourished by bonding and traditional meals, its internal logic fragmented. Its core directive, reproduce and overwhelm, was diluted by the biochemical signals of emotional memory and ancestral bonding. One infected patient, a teenage girl in Turkey, began humming in her sleep. Not unusual, except the virus, isolated from her, carried that hum in future strains. Other patients exposed to the altered virus started humming too. Same tune. The virus had started to remember. The Zaraxi were horrified. Virox, 99 was built to erase identity, to sterilize planets and leave nothing behind. But on Earth, it had become a carrier of human memory, feelings, and even culture. Humanity had turned the perfect weapon into a sentimental archive. In a last-ditch effort, the Zaraxi prepared the Scorch Directive, orbital bombardment. If the virus couldn't kill the humans, they would wipe the petri dish clean. The fleet moved into geosynchronous orbit. Target locks engaged. Countdown, 72 hours. But they were already too late. The virus had breached the fleet. The infected drone hadn't just malfunctioned. It had connected. Through its brief physical interaction, it had introduced a mutated strain to the network. Within 24 hours, low-level operatives aboard the main vessel began showing symptoms. Not physical decay, worse. Curiosity. One technician requested leave to stare at the stars for hours at a time. Another was caught sculpting clay, despite having no artistic programming. One began preparing soup in the mess hall. No one knew why. The virus had carried human behavior through biochemical resonance, and now the most advanced empire in the galaxy was hearing Earth's heartbeat inside their own thoughts. Back on the surface, Lena Moreno prepared her final report. She didn't send it to governments. She broadcast it freely. The cure is not in the soup. It's in the connection. The rituals. The stories. The way we care. The virus isn't just adapting anymore. It's learning. And for the first time, it's afraid of us. The humans were no longer running. They were feeding each other, and they were winning. The Zeraxi Council fragmented within 2 Earth days. Their neural lattice, once perfect in synchronicity, now pulsed with static. Thoughts deviated. Shared intent wavered. The virus had breached the core, not through biology, but through resonance, emotional memory, echo behavior. A disease designed to overwrite had been overwritten itself, and now their perfect minds whisper in languages they had no evolutionary history with. One by one, nodes dropped from the lattice. Some refused orders. Some simply stopped responding. One node, designated Kel 117, walked into bioengine chamber and dismantled its own containment field while softly reciting something it had no name for, a story about warmth, a child, and a bowl of something called sopa de mama. The high mind initiated a full system quarantine. Too late. The virus had already seeded recursive cultural loops within infected Zeraxi. Some began hoarding scraps of organic material. Others tried, without understanding why, to simulate cooking. One constructed a small fire using broken drone limbs and warmed nutrient paste over it, staring silently at the flame. Meanwhile on Earth, the signal spread faster than Virox ever had. Lena's broadcasts had been picked up by resistance cells, surviving communication hubs, even a few outposts that had long been thought abandoned. It wasn't the science that gave them hope. It was the simplicity. Anyone could fight now. You didn't need a lab. You didn't need an army. You just needed a pot, a fire, and someone who refused to give up on the person they loved. In the ruins of Johannesburg, an old man used scavenge pipes to build a stove. He'd lost everything, his children, his wife, but he remembered her recipe. Lentils, chicken stock, bay leaf. He made it for 12 orphans who didn't speak his language. By morning, half of them could sit up. 2 days later, one of them laughed. In Beijing, a gang that once raided med depots had turned their compound into a soup kitchen. No drugs, no weapons, just vats of broth and a rule. If you eat here, you stir the pot. They didn't understand the science. They didn't need to. They only knew the sick got better, and the virus couldn't withstand shared memory wrapped in warmth. The military, fragmented and confused, started listening to local healers. A retired soldier in Appalachia taught drone operators to read pulse through the skin while feeding patients stew. A tribal shaman in the Sahel explained that the spirit needs food as much as the body. Soldiers nodded. Notes were taken. Fire pits were dug. The Earth wasn't fighting back with bullets. It was fighting back with humanity. Above, the Zeraxi command ship spun in chaotic orbit, their organic processors corrupted by a virus that now hummed lullabies and whispered stories into every neural interface. Fleet AI tried purging memory cores, but found them laced with human emotional residue. One flagship, Zenmero, declared itself tired and rerouted its course toward the sun, not out of malfunction, but as if it understood sorrow. Aboard another, Engineer Surik, 9 painted crude images on the wall with nutrient paste. Small figures around a circle, holding spoons. No command could explain it. No logic justified it. But every time he looked at it, he felt still. That was the worst part. From their perspective, they didn't just feel infected. They felt peaceful. Peace was chaos. Peace led to questions. Questions bred disobedience. The high mind attempted one final solution. Overwrite all infected nodes with hard-coded obedience. A neural reboot. They initiated a galaxy-wide signal. But when the pulse launched, something strange happened. The virus inside the system pulsed back. It responded, not with resistance, but with song. The signal was hijacked, turned into melody, a tune millions of humans had hummed while cooking, while mourning, while feeding those too weak to hold a spoon. The high mind's override signal became a lullaby. Every Zeraxi drone, AI node, and command ship that received the pulse froze. Not shut down, listened. For 47 minutes, the most advanced war fleet in the universe paused mid-orbit and listened to a human tune that had no words, no composer, and no purpose except to comfort. Below, humanity didn't even know they had won yet. Lena Moreno stood in a burnout communications hub in Paraguay. Stirring a pot while her last solar panel blinked out. Her voice cracked as she recited her mother's old rhyme. No signal, no audience. But it didn't matter. All over the planet, people were doing the same. In New York, an old rabbi boiled matzo balls for a row of strangers. In Mongolia, a herder poured hot soup into cracked bowls lined with goat skin. In the Amazon, a teenage girl shared her grandmother's pepper broth with coughing elders beneath a thatched canopy. They weren't fighting a plague anymore. They were rewriting it. Infected individuals didn't just recover. They remembered what they saw during fever dreams. Images vivid, unreal, of alien stars, cold logic, sterile machines. The virus hadn't just recorded Earth. It had recorded the Zeraxi, their ships, their cities, their protocols. And now humans dreamed of them. Lena received a final message before her comms died, an encrypted packet decoded by a teenage hacker in Nairobi. It was brief. A signal traced back to a ship in orbit. I don't know what soup is, but I remember it. Signed, Surik. That name would go on to be written in over 40 languages, etched into walls, carved into cooking pots, scribbled in school books. The first Zeraxi to break the directive. The first alien to say, I remember. The virus didn't just fail. It flipped. Humanity had not only survived, it had seeded memory into the mind of its enemy. What was once a weapon became a bridge. And above Earth, the fleet began to scatter, not in retreat, but in confusion. Some ships drifted aimlessly. Some turned and left. A few remained in orbit, quiet, passive, like sentinels too ashamed to land. Earth didn't chase them. It fed itself and waited. Weeks passed. No more orbital strikes came. No new plagues dropped from the sky. The Zeraxi fleet, once capable of sterilizing an entire planet in minutes, stayed suspended in silence above Earth. Surveillance drones occasionally blinked back online, but they no longer transmitted tactical scans. Instead, they recorded marketplaces, family meals, funerals, and laughter. Some humans worried. Others ignored them. Most had stopped caring entirely. The war, as far as they were concerned, was over. Not with bang, but a boiling pot and an open hand. Lena Moreno walked to the remnants of a rural Brazilian outpost, its solar grid humming weakly. She passed half-collapsed homes, a soup stand rigged from broken car parts, and a dozen survivors huddled beneath tarps. They weren't sick. They were rebuilding, not waiting for orders, not looking to the sky, just rebuilding. She met a child who spoke fluent Zeraxi. Where did you learn that? She asked. The child pointed up. They dream. What do they dream about? The boy shrugged. Us. Every infected human who recovered seemed to share a common phenomenon. Vivid, lucid dreams of metal corridors, binary stars, alien hands trying to mold reality through code. These weren't dreams born of imagination. They were memories, stitched into the virus, now passed back through the host network. A two-way exchange. Humanity hadn't just rewritten the virus. It had hijacked the transmission line. One dream recurred more than others. A vast chamber aboard a Zeraxi mothership, filled with floating projection screens displaying Earth's cultural history, meals, stories, dances, tears. As if the fleet no longer studied Earth as prey, but as teacher. Aboard the high mind vessel, the infection reached its core. The final directive, once immutable, began to crumble beneath emotional recursion. Its core log, meant to summarize all planetary campaigns, rewrote itself. Earth, failed target. Emotional contagion irreversible. Virus neutralized through bonding. Directive compromised. Observational phase initiated. Then it added something never seen in any log before. Status curious. No empire uses the word curious in a war report. The virus, once a calculated scalpel of extinction, had become a cultural sponge. Every attempt at isolation, counter-adaptation, or purge was met not with resistance, but empathy. When a drone landed in Madagascar weeks later, no soldiers met it, just villagers, a cooking fire, and a bowl of broth. It didn't resist. It sat. When they offered the bowl, it took it. No words, no weapons, just a universal surrender of a shared meal. The footage went viral. not through satellites or servers, which still barely function, but hand-copy drives, bootleg USB sticks, handwritten transcripts. Within days, it reached every continent. The image was simple: a mechanical invader sharing soup with humans. And somehow it made perfect sense. Within a month, more drones descended, not to attack, but to observe, to sit in circles, to mimic human behaviors. They stirred pots. Some learned to hum. Some tried dancing, awkward but sincere. Their memories no longer carried orders. They carried stories. One drone painted crude murals on a wall in Mumbai. Scenes of families feeding each other, of a boy crying, of a mother handing a ladle to a stranger. Below the mural, in broken characters, it etched, "More please." That phrase became Earth's new anthem. More please. Not more war. More understanding. More sharing. More soup. Lena's final act wasn't scientific. It wasn't strategic. It was human. She walked into a still-functioning data center in Uruguay, one of the last places with a direct uplink, and encoded a message using the only language that truly mattered now: simplicity. To whomever still listens out there, this is Earth. You came with a weapon. We replied with a meal. You wanted compliance. We offered comfort. We don't seek revenge. We only ask one thing, now and forever. Pull up a chair. We saved you a bowl. That message wasn't blocked. It was received. Far beyond Earth, across relay stations once meant for conquest. The signal echoed. Some were intercepted by other species, distant watchers who had feared Earth's extinction. Now they studied the human reply, not as anomaly, but as precedent. The species that defeated a galactic plague with chicken soup and compassion wasn't weak. It was impossible. The high mind dissolved not in battle, but in uncertainty. No future directive could account for a species that turned suffering into song, warfare into folklore, and biochemical warfare into bedtime stories. Back on Earth, the rebuilding continued, not under one flag, but under many fires. Cooking pots became the center of every community. Children were taught to make broth before they learned to write. Doctors and healers now shared space with storytellers and singers. Hospitals printed a new standard chart: recipe, ritual, response. The 3 R's. No one doubted that the universe would return someday. New species, new threats, maybe even new weapons. But Earth wouldn't forget. They'd saved themselves not through firepower or superior design. They'd won because they remembered how to hold each other, because they remembered how to feed one another, because when death landed in their streets, humans didn't run. They pulled out a spoon, and they changed the universe.